The 1980s was a defining decade for heavy metal, as the genre exploded in popularity and evolved in new, thrilling directions. This era, often referred to as the metal boom, saw metal morph from the underground to the mainstream, becoming one of the most influential genres of the time. The 80s were marked by an array of subgenres, from the glam-infused hair bands of Sunset Boulevard to the raw aggression of thrash metal. Both sides of the spectrum would shape the legacy of metal and influence the music that followed. The glam metal scene, often associated with bands like Mötley Crüe, Poison, and Def Leppard, was born out of the late 1970s hard rock scene, but reached its commercial peak in the 1980s. Glam metal was all about excess, big hair, flashy clothes, wild parties, and anthemic songs about love, rebellion, and the rock and roll lifestyle. This subgenre had a commercial edge that made it palatable to mainstream audiences, and bands like Bon Jovi and Twisted Sister crafted hits that made their way onto radio and MTV, where their over-the-top style and energetic performances became iconic. Glam metal's fusion of hard rock with pop hooks and an almost theatrical presentation allowed bands to gain widespread popularity. The style became synonymous with the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles, where venues like the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Roxy Theater saw countless acts rise to fame. Mötley Crüe, one of the most notorious bands of the era, epitomized glam metal's excess. Their album Shout at the Devil, 1983, was a massive success, featuring hit tracks like Looks That Kill and Shout at the Devil, which became staples of the genre. With their highly stylized appearance and rebellious, hedonistic lyrics, Mötley Crüe became symbols of glam metal's boldness and commercial success. Similarly, Poison's Look What the Cat Dragged In, 1986, spawned hits like Talk Dirty to Me, becoming another major success story in the glam metal world. Yet, while glam metal ruled the airwaves and the concert halls, another, darker form of metal was emerging at the same time, driven by bands who rejected the commercialism of glam and sought to push the boundaries of heaviness, speed, and aggression. This was thrash metal, a subgenre that would later be defined by the big four bands, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax. Thrash metal emerged in the early 1980s in response to the perceived softness of glam metal, and its music was fast, aggressive, and intensely technical. The origins of thrash metal can be traced back to bands like Metallica, who, with their debut album Kill 'Em All, 1983, set the stage for thrash to become one of metal's most important subgenres. The album's raw, fast-paced sound was a departure from the more polished glam metal style, characterized by intricate guitar riffs, high-speed drumming, and harsh, growling vocals. Metallica's revolutionary approach laid the foundation for a wave of thrash bands to follow. Megadeth, formed by former Metallica guitarist Dave Mustaine, followed suit with their 1985 album Peace Sells. But who's buying? An album that combined complex song structures and political lyrics with relentless aggression. Similarly, Slayer's Rain in Blood, 1986, became a seminal album in the thrash movement, known for its lightning-fast riffs, brutal drumming, and often controversial, violent themes. The thrash scene was one of rebellion and intensity, and it spoke to fans who felt alienated by the more mainstream, flashy elements of glam. Thrash bands were less concerned with glam aesthetics and more focused on the music itself, creating songs that were fast, furious, and full of energy. With lyrics often tackling themes like war, politics, and societal issues, thrash metal had a sharp edge that reflected the anger and disillusionment of the time. The aggressive, anti-establishment ethos of thrash metal made it a perfect fit for the burgeoning underground music scene, where it gained a loyal following. In addition to the Big Four, many other bands were integral to thrash metal's rise in the 1980s. Anthrax, with their 1987 album Among the Living, became known for their unique blend of thrash and humor, while bands like Exodus, Testament, and Creator solidified the thrash movement's position within the metal world. These bands helped define thrash metal's unique blend of speed, complexity, and raw energy, establishing it as the antidote to the glitzy commercialism of glam metal. While glam metal and thrash metal dominated the 1980s, other subgenres of metal also found their footing during the decade. Speed metal, power metal, and death metal all began to emerge, each carving out their own niches within the broader metal landscape. Bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Dio helped define the sound of traditional heavy metal with their epic songwriting, soaring vocals, and larger-than-life performances. Meanwhile, death metal, with its guttural growls and brutal guitar riffs, was beginning to take shape through bands like Death and Possessed, who would go on to influence the extreme metal scenes of the 1990s. The 80s metal boom wasn't just a passing fad, it was a musical revolution. The decade saw the expansion of metal's cultural reach, from underground clubs to major stadiums, and from regional sounds to a global movement. While glam metal brought metal into the mainstream with radio hits and MTV videos, thrash metal kept the genre's rebellious spirit alive, pushing the limits of heaviness and speed. The clash of these two subgenres during the 80s helped to redefine what metal was and would become, influencing countless bands in the decades that followed. In retrospect, the 80s marked a time of unprecedented creativity, diversity, and innovation within the metal genre. It was a decade in which bands from all corners of the globe took the sound of metal to new heights, paving the way for future generations of musicians. Whether it was the glam-infused party anthems of the hair bands or the raw fury of thrash, the 80s was an era that solidified metal as one of the most important and enduring genres in the history of rock music.